Hi, I'm April from performingineducation.com, and today we're going to be talking about something that teachers really struggle with when it comes to first planning project-based learning. And this is the driving question. So I've been doing project-based learning in my classroom for the last 6 years, and something that I really love about it is that it is all based around one very simple driving question that it's easy for students to understand. It gets them excited about the project, and it's just something that makes it easy for me to plan each lesson and to follow. So without that driving question, it can be a really big problem for teachers. So today we're talking about the driving question and how to write it. We need a topic in order to start a driving question. So if you don't have a topic and you haven't really started planning your project-based learning activities, what I would suggest is watching my video on the basics of PBL and picking up my planning guide so that you can make sure you start that process before you start writing a driving question. So if you don't have a project topic in mind, then you can't really write a driving question. So here's the training. I hope you enjoy it, and as always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. So a little bit about me. I started project-based learning several years ago, and I really did not have a lot of support. It was something fairly new, and it wasn't really something that schools and administrations were adopting, and so I just kind of tried a project-based learning activity on a whim, and it kind of happened from there. So I struggled for a couple years trying to make sure that I was including more in-depth inquiry, trying to have my students kind of move away from the quick activities into that in-depth inquiry. And so along the way, I've come up with a lot of different ideas and strategies for making it easier for students to adapt to project-based learning and for teachers to plan it. So my blog at performingineducation.com, I try to include lots of blog posts that make it an easy transition for teachers, and then video trainings like this. So why do I do project-based learning? Well, it is an amazing way for my students to learn the standards. I work in an area where students are mostly low income. We're all Title I schools, and so this is even more important to engage these students in something that's really going to help them in their future. So the real world application is key. Having a purpose when you learn and apply skills really helps, because a lot of times these students don't even want to be in my class, especially at the older grade levels. And so knowing that they're actually doing this for a purpose really helps them sit down and learn and engage with the standards. And then also being able to bring all of my students with different ability levels into a project with one common cause has helped a lot. Before, when we did worksheets or short activities, you know, it was the students at the back table who needed extra help, the students who were done quickly, and the students didn't really interact with each other, and they saw which student was good at it, which student was not good at it, the usual. But now really the kids come together and they have different skill sets, and they know which kids are really great at technology, which are great artists, which are the idea kids, which are the good leaders. So they are able to not just look at who's good at math or who's low in math, or they look at what different abilities each student or class has and how we can use those abilities and strengths for our common cause. So that is why, to me, the driving question is something that I think teachers are really concerned about and that teachers really overthink. And so a lot of times when we're planning project-based learning in the beginning, we get stuck on the driving question. So this training is really just to give you an easy format so that you can make your driving questions in less than 5 minutes. And then when you start really writing lots of project-based learning activities and you get better at it, you will be writing these in less than a minute. So this is just a question you pose to students to guide them through the problem or process that your overall project-based learning activity is going to attempt. We are going to learn and practice key standards while we explore the driving question, but the standards don't need to be stated in the driving question. In fact, they shouldn't be stated. Now, a piece of the standard, like the topic, will be in it, but we don't need to tell the students the standard within the driving question. That's separate. When you put it on your board, put it separately. And something really important about a driving question is it needs to be an open-ended question and not a directed question. So when I train you on the 3-piece formula that I use for driving questions, you won't even have to worry about this because the 3-piece formula really leads you to an open-ended question. But just in case, I want to make sure that you know that a driving question is supposed to lead them from one part of the project to the end. And so basically, it needs to be something that's going to encourage in-depth inquiry. If they can answer the question in 5 or 10 minutes, then you're going to have a problem. It's not really going to drive the in-depth inquiry as you go along. So directed questions have one correct answer. They're just quick facts. They're things like, what's the profit when you sell an RC car in your toy store if you're creating a business as a project-based learning activity? Students can make a calculation and they can answer it, and they're done. Okay, we want to include open-ended questions that encourage students to continue to research or inquire about a topic. So a better question, a more open-ended question would be, how do toy store owners get customers to visit their stores? This has multiple correct answers. It allows students to approach it from different viewpoints and also requires them to investigate before answering the question. So if we answered that question as a class, it would take a lot of different pieces that we would have to do. We'd have to do some data collection. We'd have to be surveying people. We would have to be coming up with some products for a toy store and finding out what products would work best to get customers to visit their stores. We'd have to look at pricing. As you can see, that's a huge difference. Just by having that question that's open-ended, it's going to include a lot more in-depth inquiry into that topic. So there are 3 pieces of a driving question, and I know that makes it sound like it's a really long question, but the driving question, once you see it all together, is going to actually be really short. And so like I said, we overthink it. So the first piece is we need to include in the driving question who's responsible. So are students going to be doing this inquiry individually, in partners, as a small group, or a class? So your end product that students are going to have, and there may be multiple end products, but is it something they're going to create individually, in partners, as a small group, or as a class? If they're going to create it individually, we can start our question with the words, how can I? If they're going to do it in partners, we can start with, how can my partner and I? If we're going to do it as a small group, we can say, how will my group and I? If we're going to do it as a class, we can say, how can my class? Or how can we? And that's just the first part of your sentence, just a few words, okay? Telling them who's responsible for that end product. And a lot of times you may have your students be individually responsible for the end product and say, how can I? But they'll, of course, go to and use other students as experts or helpers, or just to give them feedback. They'll work with other students within your class. So if you are having them do their end product individually, you're not keeping them to their own, like they don't have to do it completely on their own if you're starting with how can I, okay? So don't stress too much about this. So the end product, who is responsible for it? Is it us as a class, a group, or individually in partners? This is the meat of it. This is the second piece of your driving question. This is what the challenge or problem is. So what challenge will your students be completing? This is where the topic goes. If there's a problem, which problem are they trying to solve? Okay, we're going to look at a specific example, so don't stress out yet. And then piece 3 is the audience. So what authentic audience will receive the end product? So somewhere in your driving question, your students need to know who their audience is for. So you need to mention the audience. This seems like a lot, but if we put it all together, who's responsible? Okay, I am individually responsible. I am going to be outputting my product, okay? So I put, how can I? Now, audience and challenge, they're interchangeable. You could do the audience first or the challenge first, whatever kind of makes most sense for your project. So I have my audience. My audience, people in my school. Now you might say, oh, people in my school, my teacher, other students in my class. That's not project-based learning. We want to actually get somebody from the field, like a biologist or somebody, a business owner. Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with that. But in this case, you'll see that in this project-based learning activity, we were actually making disaster kits for the other classrooms in our building. So we didn't have disaster kits in our building, and it was something that our principal wanted us to do. And so what we did is we had the students create them for the classrooms, and then they went in and they trained each classroom how to use them. They gave all the students little guides as far as like in the situation of its extreme weather or any natural disaster, the specific ones to our area, what the students and the teachers should do if they were at school and this happened, or if they were at home and it happened. We also gave them little lists of how what was in the disaster kit, so that when they went home they could create their own. So if you can see, it is an authentic audience. It's not just I make a report and I present it to my teacher and the students in my class. This was appropriate for this project-based learning activity. So PSA over for those of you who are like hardcore PBLers and you're like, no, that's not a good audience. Well, it fits for this situation. So the people in my school are the audience, and the challenge is how can I help them stay safe during severe weather and natural disasters. Now, this is a second grade standard if you look at the Next Gen Science standards. And so this was a second grade project-based learning activity. They individually could do it, but with second graders, we could easily change that to how can we, with kindergartners, we could say, how can our class, and just have them all read about it together, inquire about it, learn how to make one, and produce one as a class, because we know with kindergartners and PBL, there's a lot more direction that needs to happen. And then on the other side of the spectrum, if we were doing this for sixth graders or middle schoolers, we would of course have them create their own. So how can I would be appropriate? So your driving question, very simple, but you can really alter it to make it more appropriate to your situation or grade level. And these are the disaster kits that we did. You can see the little list that they made for students, telling them how to make their own and what was included. So I just wanted to share that so you get a little context for what the driving question was used for. And I would say that they did appropriately answer the driving question. They did a great job of it. So like I said in the introduction, if you don't have the planning guide and you're not using this in order to structure your project-based learning activities, you need it. It's totally free. You can find it at performingineducation.com/planning guide. No spaces, no dashes, just planning guide. Okay, this has all of the pieces of project-based learning. You can either type into it or you can print it and write on it. And this is where you're going to put that driving question that you were awesome at writing now. You can also, I really suggest this, go back in the video, pause it, look at the template I gave you, and look at the example in order to write your driving question when you go to do your own. And if you are really looking for more information on project-based learning, check out my blog, performingineducation.com. On the top, it says interested in project-based learning, click start here. It has all of my posts and information on project-based learning, as well as any of the pre-made resources that I have. But I really, really, really recommend that if you are looking for extra help implementing project-based learning in your classroom, that you join us in the course. We have a full course. It is worth up to 8 credits for professional development. You get a certificate at the end depending on the work that you do, and you just get it approved by your school, but you get that certificate. It walks you through every step of planning and implementing project-based learning. If you go to performingineducation.com/courses, so that's plural, you will see all of the lessons that are included in this training. It also comes with support. You'll be able to send me a lesson plan and get feedback and really make sure that you have your first lesson planned perfectly, okay? And so this is not an expensive course. It is very affordable, and it is a great way just to get all that extra help so that you don't have to spend all this time just researching it by yourself, okay? Join us, get the help and direction that you need, okay? You can find it at aprilsmith.teachable.com, or you can go to performingineducation.com/courses. Right, thank you guys so much for joining me for this training. As usual, if you have any questions at all, please email me at april@performingineducation.com, and I hope that you will share this video with your friends that are trying to implement project-based learning in their classroom as well.